I'm Eric Folks, Instructional Technology Coordinator for Lampasas ISD. Today we're going to talk about Microsoft Excel 2010 and how to get started using Excel for instruction and various office productivity tools. We're going to address sheets versus workbooks, formatting tabs, renaming and moving sheets, adding text to cells, editing and formatting text within cells, adjusting column width, row width, adjusting word wrap, inserting rows and columns, formatting background color, cells, rows, or columns, adjusting cells, rows, and columns, background images, and the all-important help. Seems like a lot, but really it's not too much. Let's go ahead and jump in. Alright, first thing you're going to notice when you open up Microsoft Excel 2010 is that you've got a ribbon of menu options up at the very top that are dependent on the tabs that you have selected up at the very top. So the options that you're going to see in these tabs and whether or not they're active or inactive probably are going to depend on what you've got selected in the actual Excel document itself. You can see we have various sheets that Excel is going to integrate into your workbook by default. So I've got one workbook open that has 3 sheets to it. So when I go File, Save As, it gives me the option to save it as an Excel workbook. Okay, so that's a collection of all the various sheets in there. If I want to go File, Print, I can print just single sheets if I want to, print active sheets, entire workbook, or a particular selection. So it's important to know that when you're working with sheets, you have the ability to right-click on them and rename them in order to stay organized. But users can toggle between the sheets in order to display various information. Most of the time, people don't use sheet 2 and 3 and just leave it in the workbook and put the majority of their stuff on sheet 1. Okay, so we've talked about sheets and workbooks and general orientation to the menu options and how they're dependent on the tabs that we choose. Let's start working with text. How do we add text to a cell? Well, as you might expect, if I just double click on a cell and start typing, it adds text. I can also single click on a cell and then click up here on the formula bar and start typing, and the text will show up like that as well. So adding text, not too difficult. So what if I add so much text that it can't display in a particular row or column? So you can see in this case I've entered the text, a whole bunch of text, in the column G, row 9. But because there's so much text, it can't actually fit in there. So I can resize that column to fit it if I want, or I can right click on the actual column itself and format the cells so that it's under alignment here. I can wrap the text, shrink the text to fit, or merge cells if it's over multiple cells that I've got selected. So let's just say I wrap text. You can see before I wrap the text, it spills over into the other columns. I click OK, and now all of that text is wrapped around and kept within that particular column. I can always undo any action that I've done in Excel, just like in the rest of the Microsoft Office suite. But it's important to know that any of the text I can edit, change, and work with simply by selecting the row that it is, the row or the cell that it is anchored to. So if I select G9, okay, column G, row 9, you can see all the text that's associated with it. But let's say I try to select the text using this part. Okay, what has spilled over from G9 to H9, there's no text that's showing up here to indicate that there's text in that cell, and that's because it's anchored to this one. So when you're working with text, especially if wrap text is not an option that you've enabled, you're going to have to find out where the text starts, what row and cell specifically it starts on in order for you to be able to edit and work with that text. So let's say that you have selected that text and you want to adjust the size of the text. Okay, when I've got some text selected, whether it's the text itself or the cell, all I have to do is go up here and adjust the size of the text, and you can see Excel is going to preview what the change is going to look like when I look at those various options. I can also change the color of the text, and you can see it's previewing that as well. Okay, I can also change any sort of fill color behind the cell itself, and you can see that's not going to spill over and follow the text. Might want to turn on my word wrap. So if I right click, Format Cells, under Alignment tab, wrap the text, and I say OK, and now all of that is within that particular column. So if I want to resize any of the columns or the rows, I just put the mouse over the edges of the columns or the rows and left click and drag, and you can see now that column has been resized. I can do the same thing with rows by left clicking and dragging on the edges of the rows themselves. Okay, so I'm going to select that text and I'm going to bump it down to something a little bit more manageable for our training purposes. Okay, so we've got text selected. We're able to adjust the font size, the text color, the background. Of course, there's our bold, italic, underline. We've got lots of different options right there. We can also work with the alignment of the text in the cell itself. So let's say that I decide I want this row to be a little bit bigger, and I want to align the text in the center of this cell. I've selected the cell, so I'm going to click Center, and so that's going to center the text from left to right, and then I'm going to do a middle align, so it aligns the text in the middle of the cell itself. Okay, pretty straightforward, right? Alright, so let's say that I want to actually work with the border of the text itself. So I can right click on that, Format Cells, and click on the Border tab in order to add a particular border. So I'm going to select a straight solid line. I'm going to select that I want, and you can see my border options right here. I'm going to outline the entire thing, and the color is set to automatic based on the theme, but I'm going to override it and say I want it to be purple, and I say OK, and you can see that the text has now got a purple outline to it, and that's not showing real purple, is it? So let's select it one more time, go back in there and make sure that that held. So we want it to be purple for that, and I say OK, and there's my purple border to that particular cell. Okay, so we've covered working with text, adding background colors and border colors to individual cells. The same principle would apply if we selected multiple cells, and we can do that by just left clicking and dragging across and down and selecting whatever cells we want. A very important thing to know how to do in Excel is to merge cells. Let's say we've got a bunch of different cells. We want them all to be combined into one individual cell instead of a bunch of separate ones. I select the cells I want to merge. Then I'm going to right click on the space and click Format Cells. And under, let's see, Font, Alignment, under Alignment, I have the option to merge cells. And when I click OK, it's going to take all of those and merge them into one large cell. Okay. Alright, so let's say we want to move rows or columns around. How do we do that? I've put a little bit of text in here, a little text in here, some numbers and some data, and I want row 1 to become row 3. So what I can do is, when I'm selecting rows or columns, I want to put my mouse or my cursor on the actual number of the row or the letter of the column in order to select the entire thing. You can see when I clicked on the A up here, it selected the entire column A. Just like if I left click on the number 1, it selects the entire row for 1. Okay, so if I want individual cells, I would left click and drag to select just those cells. If I want the entire row or column, I would click on the number or the letter. So once I have done that, I can very easily right click on it and cut to delete it, and then I can left click on the row that I want it to be pasted into, and so I left click on the number 3 to select it, and then I right click and I will paste. And so now I've taken all that text from 1 and moved it to 3. So pretty straightforward and pretty easy to do. One thing that I would recommend, you're probably not going to want to select an entire row or a column and then cut it and then try to paste it into an individual cell. We want to apples to apples, oranges to oranges, cut and paste. So if you are cutting an entire column, make sure that you are pasting it into an entire column. If you are cutting maybe 10 different cells, make sure that you are pasting into a space that matches what you've cut from, and the results are going to be a whole lot cleaner and better for you. Okay, so we've done some basic things with Excel. Let's look at our list here and see what we haven't done. We've got formatting tabs, renaming and moving sheets. That's just as simple as right-clicking on them to rename them, and if I want to move them, I can just drag them. Okay, pretty straightforward. Adjusting column width and row width, we talked about doing that. That's just mousing over the edges in order to resize. Let's see, word wrap we've got, background color, cells, rows, columns. Adjusting borders, we've talked about that as well. Just select the cells that you want, right click and go to Format Cells, and under Border you will make the adjustment there. And the two things we haven't talked about so far, last two things to talk about are background images and the help. So if I want, I can go to Page Layout, Background, and I can select an image as my background for my entire sheet. Okay, so one more time, that is the Page Layout tab, the background. So if you click on background, then you browse to whatever picture you want, then that can be your background. So we can, using Control A or the edit and select all of these different cells, and we can change the colors of those cells by right clicking on there saying Format Cells, and we want the fill to be, maybe it's let's make it something that you're going to be able to see, this tacky orange. So I say OK, and you can see all of them now are all the cells are going to be formatted that way. Okay, versus a background image, we would actually insert the image, and once we've inserted the image, it looks like we need to select all these cells and have no color to fill in order for our image to show. So you saw a second ago I added the background, these lilies, and because all of the cells were on the entire sheet were filled with a color, we couldn't actually see the image. It was covered up. It's just like if I take an individual cell and add a fill color to it, it's going to cover up the image that we've got behind it. Okay, so there's lots to Excel, lots of advanced formulas and things like that we're not going to get into today, but an important resource that you should be aware of is the all-important question mark in the top right-hand corner. If you click on that, it's going to give you various help options, lots of getting started tutorials for Excel 2010, and lots of support, including some videos and different things like that. So I would encourage you to take advantage of those as well. Alright, again, this is Eric Folks, Instructional Technology Coordinator for Lampasas ISD. Today we talked about getting started with Microsoft Excel 2010. I hope it was helpful and beneficial. Have a great day.